Hi, and welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, I have a couple of announcements. The Johnson Center provides this free webinar series, so this information is accessible no matter where you may live. We host several webinars per month, so visit our website to see the current schedule. Just go to www.johnson-center.org and select the webinars button on the right side of the screen. New webinars and events are often added, so I encourage you to visit our website and select the Join Our Email List button that appears on the homepage. And to get up-to-date news and events from the Johnson Center, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as we often announce grant and scholarships, research opportunities, and special events and presentations there. And be sure to check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Johnson Center, where you will find a library of several of our past webinars covering a wide variety of topics. For those of you who are in Austin or nearby, be sure to follow our social media pages for upcoming announcements about summer camps and classes, summer workshops, our April Teddy Bear Clinic, a fun online auction starting 1 week from today, and a special announcement for new grants and scholarships for diagnostic and counseling services. And be sure to follow our colleagues at the Autism Research Institute, as they host their own webinar initiative and they share some great resources on their website and social media pages. If you would like a certificate of attendance after today's webinar, look for a follow-up email in your mailbox 1 hour after the webinar concludes, or look for the link on our YouTube channel in the webinar description. It will contain instructions on how to get your certificate. If you have questions during the live webinar, you may type them into your GoToWebinar control panel. If you are watching a recording of this webinar, you may email questions to the presenter at info@johnson-center.org. So now let's get started. Today's webinar is presented by Amanda Tami. Amanda holds a master's degree in counseling psychology and has completed a recertification program in applied behavior analysis. In addition to being a board-certified behavior analyst, Amanda is also a licensed professional counselor. She has experience working with both children and adults, including those who have autism spectrum and other pervasive developmental disorders, ADD, ADHD, anxiety issues, and trauma, both as a BCBA and as a counselor. She has additional specialized training as a counselor in EMDR therapy and its applications to children. Amanda heads up the Johnson Center's Behavioral Services and Counseling programs and is a frequent webinar presenter. Please welcome Amanda.
Thank you, and thanks for everyone for being here today. We're going to be talking about bullying in elementary school, but much of the information and resources that I'm going to provide apply beyond elementary school and are applicable to students of almost all ages. So thanks for being here. It's a really important topic. Let's get started with some statistics about bullying. So 25 to 30% of students report that they have been bullied. That's over a quarter of all students. 70% report that they have witnessed other students being bullied, and 30% report that they have been the bully, that they have engaged in bullying behavior. Verbal and relational bullying are the most common. We're going to talk about the different types of bullying in just a minute, but these two are the most common types of bullying. Middle school is the most common time period for bullying. So this presentation focuses on elementary school, but in middle school is when kids are more likely to be bullied. And like I said, the information that I'm going to provide applies to students of most ages. And while reports of bullying are increasing, studies suggest that the rates of bullying are actually decreasing. The increased reports are due to increased awareness and increase in prevention programs and encouraging students to report that they're being bullied. So today we're going to cover lots of different aspects of bullying. First, we're going to define what bullying is. We'll talk about risk factors and effects of bullying. We'll talk about signs of bullying that you should look for as a parent, and what you as a parent can do and what you can teach your child to do if they are bullied or if they're witnessing bullying. So let's start with a definition. The CDC defined bullying as any unwanted aggressive behaviors by another youth or group of youths who are not siblings or current dating partners This would involve a real or perceived power imbalance. Power imbalance meaning the bully has power over the victim in some way, and repetition of behaviors or high likelihood that the behaviors will be repeated. It's not a one-time thing. It's something that happens more than once between the same two students or group of students and the victim. Bullying can be direct or indirect. Direct bullying would be these aggressive behaviors that occur in the presence of the targeted person or the victim. So name calling, physical aggression toward the victim, saying mean things to the victim. Indirect bullying is bullying that occurs when the targeted person or the victim is not directly there. It's not communicated directly to that person. For example, spreading rumors or convincing other people to treat the victim in a bad way. There are 4 different types of bullying. Physical, which would be physical aggression, beating the child up, pushing them, physically hurtful things. Verbal bullying, which is pretty much what it sounds like, verbally attacking the person, saying mean things to the person, saying hurtful things. Relational bullying is that which harms reputations or relationships. So doing things to isolate the person or turning other people against the person, spreading rumors, gossiping about the person, things that make other people that turn away from the victim or hurt the victim socially in some way. And damage to property. Damage to property be similar to physical bullying, but instead of being done to the person, it's done to their belongings or things that they have. Cyberbullying is the use of electronic communication to bully a person. This can be in the form of verbal, relational, or property destruction, all of those types of bullying. Property destruction would be destruction of online properties, of files or social media accounts or stuff like that that is electronic. Those types of properties can still be destroyed. Cyberbullying can include sending intimidating or threatening messages, posting or sharing hurtful or shameful content about another person, or sharing private information about someone else to humiliate them. It is actually less common than in-person bullying, with statistics on stopbullying.gov ranging from 15 to 20% of students reporting having been bullied. Remember, in-person bullying was about 25 to 30% of students. But cyberbullying is often more out of the awareness of adults. So it is possible that it's underreported. If someone is being bullied in school, an adult might overhear something or observe something that's a red flag. But if bullying is being done online, adults might not see that. If it's not being done publicly on someone's social media public page, then adults might not know that it's happening. So it's possible that cyberbullying is underreported considering the statistics that we have on it. And in addition, people who experience cyberbullying, for some, it's even harder to escape the bullying behavior, the victimization. We're connected to the internet and social media all day, every day. And sometimes the only escape from someone's harassing treatment online is to go offline completely. And in today's day and age, going offline is just not realistic. It's also very isolating. Being online is how people today connect with each other. And so to ask a student or to respond to a student who's being cyberbullied by telling them, well, just don't go on social media, you're not only asking them to give up a part of their life, but you're also asking them to isolate themselves in some way. Also, the information that's shared online is permanent. It may be able to be seen for years if the proper steps aren't taken to remove it from whatever is the forum that the information is posted from. And this is important for both the victim and the bully. If damaging information is available online because someone was the victim of bullying, it can have lasting effects. But also, if there's an online record of someone's intimidation through social media, someone of importance in their future might see that, and that can have an effect on the bully as well as the victim. Now, cyberbullying is less common among elementary school students because elementary school students have less access to online information, have less access to social media, have less opportunity to engage in cyberbullying. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but cyberbullying is more common for kids who are in middle and high school because they have more opportunity at that age than do elementary school students to engage in cyberbullying. So now let's talk about the risk factors for being bullied and the effects of bullying. Sometimes there's no reason that as a child that some child is selected as the victim of a bully. At other times, the reason a child is victimized has everything to do with issues within the bully and not with the victim. But there are certain risk factors that make a child more likely to be bullied. First is kids who are quote unquote different in some way. This might be kids who have disabilities like learning disabilities, ADHD, or autism, or medical conditions that are visible physically or behaviorally, such as tics. Children who look different in some way, like kids who aren't wearing the latest styles, or kids who are overweight might be victimized by bullies. And kids who are new to the school or just unfamiliar with or don't conform to the culture of the school or the larger society. The kids who are in some way different and might stand out in some way are at greater risk for bullying. Kids who are perceived as weak can also be targeted for bullying. Kids who are perceived as weak are often easy targets and not able to defend or protect themselves, and that can make them more vulnerable. Also, children who have few, and especially children who have no friends, are at risk for bullying. They don't have the protection of a crowd. Having a group of friends, or even just having a single friend, just one friend, is a protective factor, and this reduces the likelihood that a child will be bullied. Even if the child doesn't have close friends, having a crowd that he or she can be a part of, or even just in close proximity to, can also be helpful. Bullies often target kids who are isolated and alone and don't have protection from any of their peers. And finally, some kids are targeted for bullying because of the things that they do. These are kids who might be considered annoying by their peers or instigate negative interactions, even unintentionally. They might have social challenges or odd behaviors or lacking social skills in some areas. Or maybe they have poor hygiene or respond inappropriately to friendly teasing. They stand out from some reason because of their behaviors. And a lot of kids ask, why does so-and-so bully me? What's wrong with me? Unfortunately, there's usually no easy or single explanation. A child may have some of those characteristics that we just talked about or do behaviors that make them targets for bullying, but someone's bullying behavior usually has more to do with problems that the bully is facing than anything having to do with the victim. The bully might pick on your child because they like to get a reaction out of him. The bully knows that if he teases your child is going to get really angry, try to argue, maybe cry, and then the bully has even more to tease him about. It's fun for the bully to have that control and make your child feel so powerless. And I'm sure we can all relate to that feeling when we're trying to get someone to understand that the way they see something is not right, and that what they're saying to your child knows is not true, or is trying to get them to say, no, but you're wrong, I'm not weak, or I'm not bad at football. And the bully might know that, but they're saying it because they want to see your child get upset. They want to see them have that reaction that, that we sometimes feel when we feel misunderstood or feel like someone's not listening to us. Often bullies have been victims of bullying in the past or are currently being bullied by someone else. They might perceive bullying as a way to feel powerful, a way to be more liked, especially if their own bully is popular or well-liked, or bullying someone else might be a way that they see to defend themselves and ward off bullies. That if I'm the bully to somebody else, other people will leave me alone. And sometimes bullies face stressful or chaotic home lives. They might not have good role models for problem solving, or they might be victims of abuse. They might not have much support or get much attention from their parents or other caregivers at home. And they might even be taught that bullying behavior is the way to solve problems. That if someone's mean to you, your response should be to hit them back, or to, be mean back to them. That's what some kids are taught. So the effects of bullying go beyond just the victim of bullying, but victims do definitely experience a lot of negative effects. Mental health issues like depression and anxiety, as well as loneliness and low self-esteem, is very common in victims of bullying. Health complaints, like they might complain of headaches or stomach aches. And we're going to talk later about how sometimes health complaints like that can be a sign that the child is being bullied, because they might say that they have a headache or a stomach ache as a way to get out of having to go to school or go to wherever they might face the bully. But they can also be real complaints. And that can be long-term as well. Decreased academic achievement and more school absences are associated with people who have been victimized by bullying. And trauma, bullying can actually have the effect of trauma on someone who has been the victim. And by trauma, I mean possibly going to the extent of post-traumatic stress disorder, not always, but a child might start showing characteristics of PTSD without meeting all of the diagnostic criteria. And it does not always go to that extent, but I just encourage parents not to underestimate, excuse me, not to underestimate the possible effects of bullying. There is some evidence that victims of bullying might be at risk for juvenile delinquency, and this is especially true for those kids who try to seek out friendship but are often rejected, or they don't have the social skills to form friendships. They might do things to try to fit in that end up getting them in trouble. They also might not be able to differentiate healthy and unhealthy friendship choices. The effects to victims are worse when other adverse life events have been present, and other mental health conditions are present, and when support for that victim is low. The bystanders or observers of bullying, witnesses to bullying, can also be affected by bullying. Having witnessed a lot of bullying can lead to increased use of tobacco, alcohol, and drugs. It can be associated with depression and anxiety and other mental health issues. And Those who witness a lot of bullying might have more school absences. The bullies themselves also see some negative effects, such as increased tobacco, alcohol, and drug use, destructive behavior to relationships, to property, to other people. School absences and dropping out are higher at higher rates among people who engage in bullying behavior. Early sexual activity, and as adults, people who were bullies in school are more likely to have engaged in criminal behavior and be abusive toward romantic partners and children. Again, not to say that every bully turns out to abuse their children or abuse their spouse. That's not the case at all. This is simply saying that the risk of any of these effects is higher in someone who has engaged in bullying behavior than someone who has not. Suicide is also linked with being the victim of bullying. However, statistically, bullying alone is not the cause. Lots of issues contribute to suicide risk, including depression, problems at home, a trauma history, and additionally, some groups have an increased risk of suicide related to bullying, like Native Americans, Asian Americans, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender youth. And this risk can be increased even further when these kids are not supported by parents or their peers or the school. The support of adults or caring people in their lives is really a very protective factor against some of the adverse consequences of bullying. And bullying, to added to any of those additional risk factors that I just named, can make an unsupportive or stressful situation much worse. Now, I'm not trying to downplay that bullying and suicide are linked. They certainly are. It's just that usually there are other factors, and bullying is not usually the only factor contributing to a child's attempt or thoughts or following through with suicide. There are usually other factors involved, but bullying can definitely be a factor and can contribute and can make the situation much worse. So how might you know if your child is being bullied or if your child is a bully? Let's first talk about the victim. What are signs that someone is the victim of bullying? First, remember that victims are often reluctant to report bullying. So if you suspect that your child is being bullied, you might look for some of these signs as to suggest that they are. Or if you notice some of these signs in your child, it might be a red flag to you that they could be being bullied. First, and this is any one of these or a combination of these can be a sign, especially if you see a combination of these, that's kind of a red flag. But first is if your child comes home with clothing that's torn or that's messy in a way that doesn't seem normal, or if they have damaged books or other school supplies, as well as bruises or cuts or scratches on their body, but they don't have a logical explanation for the torn clothing or for the bruises or the destroyed property. The child might seem afraid or reluctant to go to school in the morning, and again, they might complain of headaches or stomach pains as a way to get out of going to school. And those headaches or stomach pains can be real. This is not just to say that they use that as an excuse not to go. But the stress of having to go into that environment where they're treated so badly can actually have physical manifestations in the form of a stomach ache or a headache. They may be very real pains that your child is having. They might choose an illogical route for going to and from school, and again, not really be able to explain it. They might report frequent bad dreams, or you might find that your child is crying in his or her sleep. And sometimes you might wake them up from a bad dream if you can hear them or see that they're having a bad dream. You might wake them up, and they may not know what they were dreaming about. They might not remember the content. But if it happens frequently, that you can see that they're having these bad dreams, or if they just wake up scared and know that they had a bad dream, even if they don't remember it, if there's no other, explanation for it, if there's not some other source of stress in their lives, you might consider whether they're being treated badly by a peer. The child might lose interest in schoolwork and the grades might suffer. If your child normally struggles in school because of a learning disability, or school is just hard for them, school might become even more unbearable for him or her. The child might appear sad or depressed or lonely, irritable with sudden outbursts of temper, like their mood just seems like it's all over the place, more so than usual. They might request money from you to meet the bully's demands, or might even resort to stealing money from you or other family members if that's what the bully is asking from them. And they seem socially isolated with few or maybe even no real friends, and is rarely invited to parties or to the homes of other kids. And it's possible that your own child's fear of rejection may lead him or her to shun others or to withdraw socially. So what are some signs that a child is a bully, your child, or someone who you suspect may be bullying your child, if you suspect your child is the victim of bullying? Children who are bullies often threaten and dominate to get their own way. They might intimidate siblings or other kids. Often, if a bully is threatening or trying to dominate one child or one victim, there usually are others. They might brag about being better than other kids, or have just kind of an air about them that suggests that they think of themselves as better than other kids. Often the kids who are bullies have a short temper. They have a really low tolerance for frustration or anger. They're impulsive, and it's really easy to make them mad. They might not conform to rules. The rules kind of don't apply to them. And they might have just not a whole lot of patience for others' challenges, or for, someone else taking longer than usual to do something, or someone else having a hard time with an activity or whatever they're doing in class that day. They just have no patience for someone who is struggling. They might be oppositional, defiant, aggressive toward adults. They just don't follow the rules. They don't listen to adults. They don't follow direction. They may be showing antisocial tendencies or engaging in criminal behavior at an early age, but not always. If that's happening, it can be an indicator of bullying, but a lot of bullies are not engaging in criminal behavior at an early age. And they have this ability to get away with unkind or rule-breaking behavior, meaning they know the right times to pick on someone, or they know the right way to pick on someone without other people noticing that what they're doing is really mean or is bullying. So what can you do about bullying? What can you do if your child is being bullied? Well, let's first talk about victims of bullying. What can we teach the victims of bullying in order to help them stop the bullying, to no longer be victims of bullying? First, we want to teach these kids to keep a low profile. By that, I mean just kind of flying under the radar, not doing things to draw attention to themselves. And if we're not drawing attention to ourselves, if we're flying under the radar, people aren't noticing us, then the bully is less likely to notice us. And if we're out of sight, out of mind, then the bully is not thinking about us and is not bullying us. And let me, before I go any further, bullying is not okay, ever. So your child, if your child is the victim of a bully, the child should not feel like they are responsible for or to blame for being the victim of a bully. It's not their fault. And so sometimes the victim of a bully can get the wrong message when we tell them, these are things that you should do to keep yourself from being bullied. It's not to say that they should be doing something differently or that it's their fault and they need to do this instead, because otherwise they're going to be bullied. And that's definitely something that we need to talk about with kids, that no matter what is the reason for the bullying, no matter what the child is doing, for the bully to treat them that way is not okay. But here are things that you can do to protect yourself because you are being bullied. It's not to say that what you're doing before is wrong. It's to say this is how we're going to get the bully off your back. And so first is keep a low profile. Avoid the bully. Don't go to events or areas where the bully is likely to be. Again, we're not trying to punish the victim. It should not be that the victim has to change their life around or change their schedule or change their routine because someone else is treating them badly. But the reality is the bully is in that position of power right now. So to protect, for the victim to protect themselves, they need to take those steps right now until we can get this situation under control so that they are not victimized by the bully again. Don't provoke the bully. Don't do things to instigate a fight with the bully. Don't try to fight back. That bully has, anytime there's bullying present, there is an imbalance of power, and the bully has the power over the victim. And so the bully can continue to use that power, whether that be physical or social power, to hurt the victim even more. So trying to fight back or provoking the bully in some way can just make it worse for the victim. Stay with the crowd. Even in being in close physical proximity to other kids, even if you're not, don't have a connection with those kids or aren't friends with those kids, just being in the same area can protect you from a bully, because bullies are less likely to attack if there are other kids around, if they perceive that the child has a defense of some sort. And keep in mind that bullies know when is the right time or not to attack someone. They can read those cues and say, oh, right now no one's going to notice, I can get away with it. And if there are a lot of people around, it's more likely that they won't try because it's harder to get away with it. No, kids should know what makes them a target for bullying. And much of those targets that we talked about earlier are kind of out of the kid's control. But if there are things that the child is doing or could do differently, like if they have odd social behaviors or poor hygiene in some way, some of those things that can be taught, that kids can learn to do differently, it's a good idea to tell the kids, this might be making you a target, and here's what we can do about it. Or when you do this, kids have weird thoughts. How can we do that differently so that they might not pick on you for doing that? And if a child is in danger, encourage them to get help from an adult. Do this in a discreet way where the bully doesn't hear or see you, doesn't hear or see the child talking to the adult. If the bully hears or sees the child doing it, they might perceive it as tattling, which can make things even worse. So we're going to talk in just a minute about strategies that you can tell your kids for helping them communicate this information to a teacher or to another trusted adult. So parents, what should parents do if they know or suspect that their child is a victim of bullying? First, know the signs. We just talked about the signs to look for that indicate that your child is the victim of a bully. Remember that it's common for kids not to report that they're being bullied, that they feel ashamed or scared and won't tell anyone if they're being bullied. So know the signs, know what to look for. Whoops, sorry about that. And if your child does tell you about bullying, that they're the victim of a bully, or if you suspect it and initiate the conversation with your child, listen really carefully to what your child has to say. Take the reports seriously, but do consider that the child may be leaving out or be unaware of some information. And they might be leaving out if they had any part in this incident and what happened between them and the person you suspect is a bully. Definitely don't discount your child's story or blame them or criticize them, but ask lots of questions to make sure there isn't more to it. Were they and their bully getting along before the conflict started? Did your child do anything to provoke or instigate the other person? Ask questions like, tell me what was going on in the class before the bully came to you, and ask, and then what happened, as the child describes each of the events. Find out how each person acted in response to the other person, what led each person's response. I worked with a student recently who his parents were contacted by the school. He was in trouble for fighting, and another student had punched him. The other student punched him first. My client punched him back, and this was true. But my client had been poking the other student with his pencil purposefully to annoy him. And yes, this turned into a physical fight, and yes, physical aggression was not the way to handle the situation. But in this case, is it really bullying? The school would say no. The school would say this wasn't bullying because my client was provoking the person who punched first. And yes, the person who punched first should have handled it in a different way, but he did verbally ask my client to stop multiple times before he turned and punched him. So the school would say it's not bullying. Also consider the social history. Is there a persistent pattern of mistreatment between your child and the other child, or did it just happen this one time? If it was just this once, we don't know that it's bullying. Remember that bullying is a repetitive pattern. And so if this is the first time that there's been any trouble between your child and another student, we don't know yet that it's bullying. Teach your child safety strategies. Teach them when to get help from an adult, where to put yourself if you're worried about a bully, like staying around other people or identifying a safe place, that maybe there's a certain area in the school or on the playground where your child feels like they could be safe. Maybe it's somewhere near the teachers. And teach your child how to ask for help or how to tell an adult what's happening. Basically, the way that we want to teach children to approach this, and this can be really hard because if they're being the victim, if they're the victim of a bully, emotions are often running really high. But we want to teach the child to go and calmly tell a teacher, this is what happened. To give them the details of the event, including what they did to try to solve the problem and how they feel. For example, maybe we tell a child to talk to the teacher using the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why, give them all the information, and then say, I feel scared that this person's going to do this again, or I'm really worried about the other kid on the playground who I think they might be not being nice to. Teach them how to give them the information and also to state how they feel about the situation. And it's much more effective when we can give a caretaker all of the relevant information and say, here's what I did, here's how I tried to solve it myself, than to go to the teacher crying and say, so-and-so is being mean to me. Teachers might perceive that as just normal playground behavior or normal conflict between 2 elementary school students. So if we teach the kids to give very specific, detailed information, teachers are more likely to see it as the problem that it is. Encourage continued communication with you. Make sure your child knows that you're a safe person to talk to. They can talk to you with lots of support and without judgment. You're not going to blame them. You're here to help them. You're here to support them. You're a safe place to vent, to feel scared, to get help. If there are things that your child is doing that makes them a target for bullying, you will help them without judgment to identify and change these things. Very important is to help the child identify their strengths. This is essential. As we've said earlier, bullying can be really damaging to a child's self-esteem. So helping the child to see their strengths can kind of offset that self-blame and that helplessness that a child might be experiencing because they're being treated badly by a bully. Help them see what they have to offer. They're not being bullied because they're a bad person. They deserve to be treated well and they have value, just like everyone else. If after bullying, your child becomes frequently fearful or self-deprecating or loses interest in things they like, or they're not performing in some way the way they used to, like maybe their grades fall or they're not interested in the same activities that they were, and if this is kind of sudden, you may want to look at getting him or her professional counseling. Like we said, anxiety, depression, and trauma can result from bullying, and never underestimate that powerful impact that bullying can have on a child's worldview, and especially their view of him or herself. The victim of bullying might end up, seeing themselves as the problem and that they're worthless. I'm being targeted because I'm no good. I have no value. If you need to enlist other people to help to stop the bullying, contact the school. Do not contact the other child's parents. If you contact the other child's parents, they're probably going to tell the child, their child, who then might retaliate against your child and treat him even worse. And if the school is not involved yet at that point, then there are no additional protections for your child if that does happen, if the bully does retaliate. So if you're going to involve other people, involve the school so that they can put the protections in place before they go to the family of the bully. And write down the details. If you have a log of everything that's occurred with details about the times, the places, what was happening before and what came next, you can make a stronger case and will be more likely to be taken seriously by the teacher or by the school administrators. So in many cases, parents will need to bring bullying incidents to the attention of the school. When doing this, parents should expect the school to take it seriously. They do have to take those reports seriously, and they may need to do their own investigation to determine whether it is bullying or not. But if you're going to the school expressing that your child is being bullied, you should expect the school to take it very seriously and be willing to follow their procedure. That being said, the school should have and enforce policies and rules and procedures for bullying behavior. And this should include increasing adult supervision in areas on school campuses where bullying is likely to occur. The school should be willing to speak to the bully and their parents and enforce the consequences that are outlined in the schools in their policy, and those policies and rules that they have, that they should have for bullying behavior. And the school should have knowledge of who the victims are and have supports in place for them. Some schools have a really strict definition of what bullying is, and they won't acknowledge bullying, or they won't call it bullying if it doesn't fit that very strict definition. And while we do need to have a definition and be able to define what is and is not bullying, the school should acknowledge when a child feels unsafe or is not being treated well, even if it doesn't meet their definition. The effects of perceived powerlessness to a peer can be long-lasting. So even if the school won't say, yes, what's happening here is bullying, they should still be willing to support the victim and put safeguards in place to make that student feel safe in their learning environment. And other students, as a peer, there are things that a child can do to help to stop bullying. First, the child can befriend the victim. Having just one friend is protective for someone who may be a victim of bullying. As with any bullying or potentially dangerous situation, if physical aggression is involved, your child should seek the help of a parent or teacher or another adult. As much as we want to help a victim of bullying, it's better to stay safe by getting help than putting ourselves in the middle of danger. If the child is being bullied in a non-physical way, having a peer come to his or her defense is one of the best ways to help. That defense can be standing up for the victim, or it can be just as simple as being in the proximity of the victim so that he or she is no longer isolated and alone. Extending an invitation to the victim to go to another location or remove him or her from the situation is another way to help. But most importantly, as we're teaching our kids to help others who might be in trouble, who might be the victims of bullying, we need to teach them how to keep themselves safe. So some do's and don'ts about cyberbullying. What should you do or what should your child do if they are the victim of cyberbullying? Well, we do want them to block and report the bullying behavior. So block the bully and report the harassment or the nasty things that they're saying to the site. As hard as it is to resist the temptation to fight back or to say something mean back to the bully or to stand up and defend yourself to the bully, we want to be able to stay civil and kind as we're having these electronic communications. If your child responds to the bully with something else that's really unkind or mean, they have a less strong case to say, I'm the victim, because now they're engaging. The argument could be made that they're now engaging in harassing behavior as well. Always save the evidence. So if there are text messages or emails or social media threads with harassing or threatening or bullying behavior, save that information. It can be tempting to say, just delete it and forget about it. But we really need to save it so that if it continues to escalate, we have documentation and evidence to be able to report it. Tell your kids to tell a trusted adult, yourself or teachers, someone who they trust, to get help and to help them report it if it comes to the point that they need to report it to police, or even for just help reporting it to site moderators. And whenever possible, get new accounts. Deactivate current social media profiles and create new ones. Deactivate email accounts and get new email accounts. It's pretty easy to do those things. So if we can not allow the bully to be able to access this online anymore, that can be really helpful. And definitely don't reply or retaliate. Don't just ignore the problem. It's probably not going to go away on its own. And don't be a bully to someone else. Like I said, if your child retaliates or tries to reply in a way that is mean to another person, well, it might seem counterintuitive not to reply. It can then look bad for your child if you have to take further steps to protect your child. And don't take it personally or feel ashamed. It is not your fault that you're being cyberbullied, and it's not anything that you did. You are not to blame for this. We should all be teaching our kids to be an ally. If you see something online, if you see offensive or threatening or intimidating or just mean messages or social media posts, don't participate in it. Don't share it. Don't respond to it in a way that shows that you agree with what they're saying. Instead, call out the bully. Be willing to call them out on their behavior and be supportive of the victim. Just teach our kids to be a friend to everyone, and don't participate if they see something unkind going on. No one wants to see their kids hurt, but children who face adverse events have the opportunity to grow resiliency. Resiliency is the ability to bounce back from difficulties and to continue normal development despite having had this bad thing happen to them. And resiliency is a trait that is grown. It's not given. A child who has experienced hardships but has a lot of support from important people in his or her life can become more resilient to future difficulties. And difficulties are a part of life for everyone. There's no way around it. Everyone faces tough times sometimes. The key here is that resiliency is grown. Sometimes children who don't experience hardships as kids or don't have the opportunity to grow resiliency, later on, challenges that they face might be even harder. And parents can't just tell their kids to be more resilient, to bounce back. It's something that has to be grown and developed. Not all students who experience bullying are or become more resilient. So what makes some more resilient than others? First is the support that they have. So who in their lives is there for them, is supportive, is willing to help them. Those who are alone or who don't have a lot of support have less ability to grow resilience. And second, but relatedly, is how kids think about their mistreatment. If they blame themselves, or if they think that they are the cause of others' mean treatment, of others' unkind behavior toward them, or if they accept the negative judgments about themselves, they're more likely to be more significantly wounded. If they can separate themselves from the other person's actions and see that other person's actions are about the other person and not about them as the victim, they typically have less of an impact. The events have less of an impact. And the support and the meaning that adults can provide for these experiences is critically important. I've got here some additional resources. This first one is a webinar by the Autism Research Institute from just last week, and they provided strategies from the PEERS program, which is a social skills curriculum based out of UCLA. In this curriculum and in this webinar, they talk about what students should do in response to bullying and teasing. The CDC website has lots of research on bullying and prevention programs with links to lots more violence prevention resources. StopBullying.gov has information on lots of topics related to bullying, including what kids and what schools can do. This one it says OJJDP, it's the Office of Juvenile Justice. They have a publication that describes bullying prevention programs that schools can implement and the rates of their efficacy based on the criteria that the Department of Juvenile Justice is looking at, how effective these different bullying prevention programs are. The Crisis Call Center Suicide Prevention Hotline is listed here, and bullybus.org has tons of bullying related resources. It's a really good website and a really good source for lots more information and what you can do or what your child can do if they're being bullied. I have, looks like, just a couple of minutes to answer a couple of questions, so give me just a minute to see, to pull up the questions here. Okay, first question is, in the definition of bullying that you gave, it seems like rejection or exclusion wouldn't be included in, rejection and exclusion wouldn't be included, but they are considered bullying at my child's school, and I think they should be. Are they a form of bullying? Yes, they definitely can be bullying. They would be considered, they would fall under that relational type of bullying. Assuming that the rejection or the exclusion is done purposefully and maliciously, that would be relational aggression. There's a power imbalance. If the victim wanted to be included and the bully had the power to decide whether or not they would be included, and if it happens more than once, it would fall under that, under the definition of bullying. Now, if a person is feeling rejected or excluded, but the perceived bully is just not really interested in being friends with the other person, they just don't want to be that person's friend, they don't, they don't have anything in common, they don't connect, that's okay. That happens socially. Not everyone is friends with everyone else. It's not realistic to say everyone at school is friends. People form connections with different groups of people, some people more than others. And if one student wants to be friends with a certain group, but they, they don't want to be friends with that other person, or they don't connect with that person, it's not necessarily bullying. It's bullying if there's a power imbalance, if the behavior is aggressive, and if the aggressive behavior happens repetitively. If the person just isn't able to make friends with the people they want to make friends with, that's not always bullying. So yes, rejection and exclusion are a form of bullying, but make sure that you have all the information correct before you call it bullying. Are they intentionally and maliciously rejecting or leaving your child out? Okay, let's see here. What are effective school-based bullying prevention programs? And should my school have a zero tolerance policy? So I can't speak to which school-based bullying prevention programs are most effective. I don't know. That's not an area of expertise for me, so I can't really answer that. There is that resource on the slide I just was on called the I Guides. It's this one by the Juvenile Justice Department, and that can provide you some more information about which programs are most effective. As far as zero tolerance policies, again, I won't say that they're good or bad. You do want your school to take bullying seriously and hold a bully accountable, but usually anti-bullying programs have a really specific definition of bullying and who is the victim, and sometimes there's no room for individual circumstances or room for administrators to consider other factors when there's a zero tolerance policy. And often students of minorities or disabilities are disproportionately affected by those zero tolerance policies. Usually the punishment when that kind of policy is in effect is suspension or expulsion, and increasingly we're learning that those types of punishment are not good in the long term. They lead to more dropout, they lead to more delinquent behavior. Prevention programs and positive behavior support are being shown in research to be better options for bullying prevention. Okay, so we're about out of time. If you would like a certificate of attendance, look for a follow-up email in the next 24 hours. It'll have a link to a short quiz that, once you complete, will allow you to download a certificate. To receive updates on the webinar schedule, follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or sign up for email notifications. All of our webinars are recorded and available on YouTube, so you can rewatch this or other webinars at your convenience. And for more information about the Johnson Center services, contact us by phone or email. And I thank you so much for being here today.